So what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be talking about tax lien risks. We're going to go over a little bit what are tax liens, how do they work, and then really go over what you need to watch for when investing in tax lien certificates. There's quite a few good auctions coming up. In fact, one thing I was looking at earlier is Mississippi has moved all of their auctions to online auctions. And so in some of those states that used to just be on-site auctions. This gives us an opportunity to bid at these auctions, and a lot of them have very low competition. And so I would rather earn a higher interest rate in another state, as long as everything else within that state works, than in a more competitive area.
Yeah, well, and it's because the competition isn't level everywhere. There's some places that have or draw more investors because of where they're located at or how easy they are to get to. But there's a lot of different reasons to buy tax liens, and tax liens are a very attractive investment in so many different ways. But it's because of the security of the investment, though, and the ability to make a higher rate of return. It's the combination of the two. Normally, you don't get those two things together. Normally, the higher the security of the investment, the lower the rate of return. But with tax sales and with tax liens specifically, we have a pretty good rate of return here for an investment that is basically completely secured because it's secured by the real estate. That's the big thing with tax liens. When a tax lien is issued against a property, it uses the entire property as collateral for the debt that's owed. And so that can be very valuable property. And what it means is they're very secure investments here. And essentially, the investment itself, a tax lien, is it's enforced by state law. As an investor, though, one of the reasons why you want to buy tax liens is because they're so simple. There's a lower amount of due diligence that we need to do on tax liens because we're never actually buying the property. We're just buying a lien, against the property. But for the most part, though, it's because of their simplicity. Because if I buy a tax lien, I'm probably not going to have to do anything on it except for sit back and wait for it to redeem so that I can get paid, my high rate of return. That's part of what attracted people to liens is just the fact that most of the time you don't need to do anything.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're enforced by state laws. They're easy to do. We don't need to do the same type of due diligence as we would with a tax deed investment. So when we're talking about tax liens, there's a couple of things to remember. Usually it's going to be the tax collector or the treasurer that's going to be conducting the auction. So when we're going to a tax lien sale, it's usually going to be the tax collector that holds it. Also, tax liens are sold on a 1 year basis, and many times they're going to be sold the same time each year. That's the reason we see Mississippi all happening within the 31st day of August, is because they're all conducting their auctions on the same day, or in Florida the same month, Arizona the same month. And so you get to be a yearly sale that's going to happen where they're going to be offering those tax liens. Now, they can be sold on site, they can be sold online. But as we mentioned, a lot of these counties are moving to online auctions, making it easier for us to be able to invest in these states that traditionally did not have online auctions.
Yeah, in fact, we've seen incredible expansion in our ability to access different tax sales, different auctions here across the country. Um, it's the simplicity of tax liens though that draws people in, and it's the high rate of return that you can earn on the tax liens without having much risk up. So three things happen on the day of the tax sale when you go to an auction here. Number one is the lien is issued against the property. The lien begins accruing interest on the day of the auction here, whether the property sells or not, and the redemption period begins as well. So both of those things start off on the day that the lien is created. And even if the property didn't sell at auction, that redemption period is still ticking away, and the interest is still accruing because no matter what, when they go to pay it off, if they're late on their taxes, they're going to have to pay penalties or fees, in addition to that, and that's really what that penalty is, or what the interest accruing is, basically just late fees.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Also one thing that's going to happen is the redemption period is going to expire. So like Shade said, it's going to start earning interest. Excuse me, the redemption period is going to start, and the tax lien is essentially going to be issued on the property. Now, after purchasing the property, there's really only two things that can happen. I guess there is a few outliners, but 99% of the time, either the investor is going to pay off the county and the lien is going to be removed, or they're not going to pay. And essentially, that's where the property will either go through a foreclosure process through the county, as an example in Florida, where the lien holder can fill out a deed application and then it's sold at a tax deed auction. Or, like happens in most states, that lien holder can go ahead and foreclose on the property and become the new property's owner.
Yeah, which essentially here, most of the time, you end up getting checks in the mail or you getting paid on it because property is redeemed. So when a delinquent property owner pays off the money they need to pay for delinquent taxes, the county can redeem the lien. Basically, they can pay off the taxes that were owed and they can send a check to the investor for their initial investment plus the interest rate that they earned up to that point. So this is just an old image here of a tax lien check that came in for Steve from years ago.
Yeah, in fact, we're going to be talking about bankruptcy here in a minute. So I want you to kind of remember this particular check because this has to do with bankruptcy. And this looks like this was issued to me back in 2009. And I think this was for a tax lien back in 2006, if I remember right.
Yeah,
Could have been 2007.
yeah, that sounds about right. And yeah, and this is basically the worst case scenario there in what can happen uh, with it. Now, these are kind of interesting properties here in Colorado because Colorado just went through some changes in their law as a result of deals like this. So these Colorado's a tax lien state, all right, meaning that they have tax liens that have a redemption period attached to them. If that redemption period expires, in a tax lien state like this, all the lien holder has to do is they can apply for foreclosure, so they can start foreclosing on the property here. And if somebody doesn't come and pay it off, they could actually foreclose on the property for nothing more than just the taxes owed on it. And in some cases, that's exactly what happened. There were some people that got very lucky here. Like in both cases here, delinquent tax total on the property on the bottom, 29,000. The property's valued over 600,000. On the top here, we've got a property that's valued at 290,000 here, that starts at 10,000. The problem that these kinds of sales or that this creates is that the lien holder is able to get the properties for just the bare minimum of the taxes owed for the years they have here. So maybe 3 or 4 years worth of delinquent taxes, and the property could be acquired. But it doesn't leave any money left over for the property owner if they have equity in their property. It doesn't really leave any way for them to have money left over after the sale. And that's actually something they started to get in trouble for. It's one of the reasons why Colorado changed. They've set it up now so that rather than lien holders being able to automatically foreclose on properties, now lien holders have to fill out a tax deed application, just like Florida, and it puts these properties into an auction where they'll sell to the highest bidder, and then those funds are used to pay off the lien holders. And so now what that does too is it basically means that there will always be some money left over there for the property owner after the sale like that were to occur. So if the taxes owed on the property here are only 50,000, but the property sells for 150,000, that extra $100,000 would go to the property owner at the time of foreclosure. And that's basically what they had to put in place, was a system that allowed them to sell the properties rather than just having lien holders foreclose on them for nothing more than the cost.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, and we've seen a lot of things change in regards to that. So let's go ahead and let's talk about really four major risk involved with purchasing tax lien certificates. We're going to go through each one of these, and I told you to go ahead and remember bankruptcy. And part of that is because, bankruptcy does not happen very often. In fact, we get, people asking us all the time about bankruptcy and they're worried about bankruptcy. But it's really not something that comes up very much. I mean, really, what's going to happen with a bankruptcy is most of the time the county is going to go ahead and pull that property before they actually it goes to auction. So people have asked, well, can I go ahead and research for bankruptcy beforehand? Not really, because if, when a bankruptcy happens, it's going to be after the tax sale. Because if there's a bankruptcy before, the county's not going to go ahead and include it in the sale. Also, one thing to remember is that 99%, we put 99% of tax liens with a bankruptcy, you're still going to make back your money. And the reason we put 99% is we haven't heard of a case where somebody did not get back their money. Now, there could be one out there, but it's incredibly rare. We've never heard of it. And it's really pretty rare for you to actually have the tax lien go into the bankruptcy court and have to be paid payment. So that check that I told you to look at, that was a check, a partial payment for one of the tax liens that ended up having a bankruptcy. Because most of the time there is a bankruptcy on a property, what's going to happen is you're never going to know about it. You're not going to know there was ever a bankruptcy. You're just going to receive your check in the mail because within that bankruptcy, the property taxes have to get paid first. And so the only way that that happens is if there's no equity, there's no money, and then they have to put you on some type of payment program where in that case, I think it was a $1,600 lien or something like that on a single family home. I got a series of checks, sometimes a couple times a month, sometimes once a month, over a period of about 6 months or so, that went ahead and paid off all of my money that I had invested into that tax lien certificate.
Yeah, I mean, really, you only have to worry about bankruptcies really with tax liens. I mean, and even then, it's very rare with tax liens. With tax deeds, we don't have to worry about it because those properties would get pulled before any kind of an auction were to take place. And once they're sold through the county in the auction, they're no longer attached to anything like that. But yeah, so we only have to worry about it with tax liens. It's not very common, and it's not even really worth trying to look out for because you're ultimately not going to lose your money. A bigger risk, really, than bankruptcy is going to be roll up. Roll up is going to be applicable here anytime there is you've got a redemption period on the property that's multiple years long. What the roll up is how many years worth of taxes are owed on this property. Because if you're going to be able to foreclose on it, the only way the county is going to allow you to do that is if you've brought the taxes current, and that means paying off all those other old tax liens. So that's what tax lien roll up ultimately is. In order to foreclose on tax liens, the taxes have to be current, and that means you're going to have to pay off any other liens that exist outside of your lien. So it's a bigger deal in some places than it is in other places. Like, for instance, in Florida, we have to watch out for roll up because you can have up to 7 years worth of taxes owed on a property. And so if you have 7 years worth of taxes, that can add up and turn into a pretty big tax bill. But we don't have to worry about it everywhere. Like, for instance, in a tax lien state like South Carolina, they have a 1 year redemption period on their liens, and so they don't really allow enough time for there to be really a major roll up problem. So we don't have to worry about roll up so much in South Carolina as we do in other lien states like Florida.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. In fact, kind of speaking of Florida, here's kind of an example of a tax lien that we've seen many people make a mistake on when investing into Florida liens. So let's say that you were to find a tax lien certificate on a $10,000 building lot, and it's a $200 or $300, $500, let's say, a tax lien certificate. Hey, this looks like a good investment. I'll go ahead and buy this couple $100 tax lien certificate. Seems like the property has value, but you haven't gone through, or they haven't gone through and researched the other additional tax liens that are available or issued against the property. So, if I'm buying a let's say a $300 tax lien on a $10,000 lot, well, hey, my money seems protected. This is only 3% of the property's value. This is going to be a good investment. But as we start looking more into the property, there's several different years. So in this case, let's say that there's a tax lien that's a $900 tax lien, an $1,100 tax lien, a $1,300 tax lien. Well, we combine all of those tax liens together, that's going to be $9,300. And so what's happened is over the last 7 years, because we're going to need to check the life of the lien within that state. So in Florida, they allow 7 years worth of tax liens to remain on the property. In Arizona, they require 10 years. In a state like Maryland, they'll go ahead and you need to foreclose within a year and a half. So in some states, they're not going to have a huge amount of roll up, but
Yeah,
in some states, it can be pretty risky.
Texas never forgets.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and there's some states that don't. And so, in this case, we could get ourselves into harm by thinking, "Oh, this looks like a good tax lien," but we haven't looked in to additional other liens. I mean, the longer the redemption period is as well, the more liens that could be issued against it. So like in Wyoming, for example, they can go for 4 years. Well, we know there can be at least 4 years worth of back taxes in that case, and the life of lien may even go longer than that. Maybe they allow it to, 8 tax liens before those tax liens fall off.
Yeah, yeah, and those are all good points. Whenever we're dealing with tax liens, states are buying tax liens. We just want to know how, basically, if there's other outstanding money that's owed. As long as we know that answer, we'll be safe and we'll always be okay. As long as we just have some kind of a grasp of what exactly is owed. Now, I would say that one of the bigger risks for tax sale investors um, is going to be useless land. Useless land is actually a pretty big risk, and it's because, as you can see, even when we're going through the list there in New York, you can tell that some of the properties are good usable properties, but some of the properties are just leftovers. Some of the properties are junk. I mean, and it happens every time you develop an area, you're going to have certain pieces that are not usable pieces of property that that are still going to end up getting taxed. That's the main difference, is because the county is still taxing them. The county doesn't care whether the property has real value and can be sold or whether it's a leftover piece. It's still going to have an assessed value and it's still going to get taxed. And because of that, it's still going to end up cycling through the tax sale. In fact, a lot of these properties probably cycle through the tax sale over and over and over again, because somebody picks them up and realizes that they are useless and eventually decides to stop paying property taxes on it, because why pay for a property if you can't do anything with it? So when we're talking about useless land, the most common types of land we run into that are useless are landlocked properties or side lots, like properties that are adjacent. Maybe it's part of the person's yard, something like a side lot like that doesn't really have any use to us because it's only valuable to the person that lives there and that has the ability to use it if you can't put another house on it. And that's the story with a lot of land. Irregular shaped lots, swamp or wetlands, that's definitely something we run into in some cases. Thin plots of land or strips of land. We see that all the time. You'll see properties that are roads, or maybe they're only 5 feet wide and 100 feet long. We find that as well. Most of the time, you can determine a property's use by its value. Its value is usually reflective of its use. If it has use, the value tends to also be there and apply as well. But ultimately, though, it applies to any property that you can't build on. So if we're talking about residential property, then it would apply to any lot that you couldn't build a house on, or if it's commercial or any type of property, if you can't build on it, essentially we would consider it to be an unusable or useless property.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, and we always talk about property needing to have both use and value. So if you don't want to own the property, then hey, maybe somebody will pay you off. You could buy that tax lien and maybe they'll pay you off, but what if they don't? And if it's a junk property, those are the type of properties that are most likely to go to the tax sale because they are junk properties. And so it's just not worth it. People will go, I remember a few years ago, people would go on and they'd try to say, oh, look how easy it is. And they'd go buy some just trash lien, some $50 lien on, on in Florida to try to prove how easy it is. Well, that was a trash lien. They were showing people essentially, them buying a trash lien, and so we need to make sure that they're going to be good investments. The last thing is condemned property. Condemned homes. Now, when it comes to homes, we're going to look at the condition. We're never going to go out and do an on-site condition for a tax lien because chances are you're never going to own the home. But we are going to do our online evaluation like we do in stage one due diligence. Really, stage one due diligence will protect you for most tax liens that you purchase. If we're going through and we're looking at the online information, we're looking at the market values, we're getting a good idea that everything seems to be in place, well, then that's a tax lien that we're going to buy. But if we do see major damage, if we see windows broken out, if it looks like it's been abandoned and overgrown, then we're probably going to avoid those tax liens because, again, we don't want to own those properties.
Yeah, any property that is in whose condition is too rough, or if at least if it looks like it's going to need too much work, especially value limited properties. The more valuable the property is, the less this is a major problem for us. But if a property's value is limited, then we have to be very careful with the condition of the property and what we get into. In other words, some of your cheapest properties, that will come up, uh, are your riskiest properties, because they have a limited amount of value and they need a ton of work. If you have a property that's only worth 60 or $70,000, then there's not a whole lot of work you can put into that before you're going to lose money. And it wouldn't take much more than something like a roof or something to cover that cost and more. And so we're always very careful with properties that have whose condition is very rough. I mean, if it looks like it's condemned, then we probably are going to avoid it. If the condition looks like the whole house needs to be redone, we usually avoid it unless there's something compelling or some compelling reason not to.
Yeah. Now, can you see my screen, Shade?
Yeah.
Okay. One thing, we've got a few minutes before Tom jumps on here. And I just thought I'd show, we can see all of these Mississippi sales that are coming up on 8/31. So the 31st day of this month. But there was kind of interesting sale here, and we'll see these sometime. We can see this Clay County, Missouri tax lien sale. And it's going to go ahead and the date is the 24th of this month. So it's, about a week or two away. But it's always interesting to see these other counties or other states that are starting to move over to online auctions. Missouri is a tax lien state. They actually have some tax deed properties as well in like Kansas City and St. Louis. There's a number of different land banks. In fact, in last week's podcast, we actually looked at a land bank in Missouri that had property starting at 10 cents on the dollar. But whenever we see these counties start to move over to online auctions, to us, that's going to be kind of a good sign.
Yeah, very interesting. So this is Clay County, Missouri.
Yep, Clay County, Missouri. Now let's look at this first one right here and let's see what type of property it is.
Oh, it looks like it's maybe a landlocked one.
Yeah, very well could be. So, this may be a good example of what we would classify as a junk lien. We could look a little more into it, see how much the value is. But, I also kind of wonder, does that happen to be some type of creek or drainage or something? We're not quite sure, but uh, definitely could be one that we might avoid just based on what it is.
Yeah, and the face amount of 435 is not too high. You can have land that doesn't necessarily have a lot of value that could have a lien amount of about that. Now, for a lien amount here of $3,300, that's enough that the property has to have some kind of value there to it in order to justify that. And as we can see, there's improvements to it. It looks like it may be a home, something like that. We've got a physical address on it. There you go, in Fairfield.
I don't think that's it. Oh, this is Birmingham. It's kind of
I didn't
weird.
even I didn't even know there was a Birmingham,
Well,
Missouri.
maybe it's not. I don't know where I got that. Oh, I just see. Oh, it's a Birmingham fire station. So there's.
Oh, it's a little town. I mean, it kind of looks similar. Oh, except we don't see that big thing on the right.
My example's not turning out too well.
Just try another one here. If this one's being hard to find.
Yeah.
Yeah, although for most of these that are improved, they're usually fairly easy to see. This one you can see is a nice single family house. It's on King Avenue here.
Oh, they got a property image.
Oh
Oh, look
yeah.
at that.
Oh yeah, they've got a sign up in front there too.
I didn't know that they had to put signs on them for.
I wonder if there's an image for every one of those properties.
We'll take a
Probably.
look.
Oh, it's in Excelsior Springs. I've been to Excelsior Springs. Yeah, that looks like a pretty good property here, especially considering that its base amount is under 5,000. Yeah,
Yeah,
valued at 216, so the value is certainly there.
but let's see if they do have them. Oh, I clicked on the same one. Oh, they have a PDF too. It just looks like it's maybe the tax information.
Yeah, maybe it's the notice they send out.
But what it is nice is we can see the roll up right there.
Yeah.
So we know what the total roll up is. In fact, those 2 years are what are combining for it.
Yeah, oh, and we do have, yeah, we've got a property image and a sign up from each one of them. So that's pretty handy for us. Um,
One thing that's kind of interesting is it looks like there's some type of sign here on the door. Now that may be, you know, that may be a sign about, I guess that may, because it might say no trespassing. I thought that might be a condemned sign, but it could be a no trespassing sign. But, that's something we would look for. Now, this home looks like it needs some work, but based on the value, would look a little more at the condition to make a decision on it. But if it has enough value, even though it's still kind of rough, we may still go ahead and purchase the tax lien on it based on what the lien amount is versus the actual value.
yeah, I mean, oh, that one's a big that's a big
Oh, so
property, like a school or something,
track?
huh?
Yeah,
An old track, maybe. This is also in Excelsior Springs. Oh, this is probably an old school. Yeah, go down to that street side image.
that's an old street side image.
Yeah, it is from 2008. Very old. But that's
There's
a big
newer.
building, though.
Yeah, that's a massive building. Well, and a massive piece of land as well. I mean, you look how big that building is, and then you've also got all of that. Now,
Uh, Oh, yeah, we
whenever,
can see it's the 2 years there. They're combining on that.
yeah, you got a $6,000. I mean, that has some value to it, but it also that's a big project.
All of these lanes would have a tremendous amount of security here in them and very safe investments.
It's a duplex.
Yeah, that's not bad.
At least, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's a duplex. I find this really interesting. I didn't know, and I guess we could have looked back through the state guides, and they would probably tell us that they had to do notification, but I didn't realize for a tax lien that they actually have to go through there and notify and put a sign in each one of the yard.
Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting. I don't know that we've at least I don't remember seeing that in Missouri either.
Yeah, so I think Tom should be coming back pretty soon, and he'll go ahead and go over some important real estate information, talk about some cool things. So maybe we'll look at one more property while he jumps on.
Oh, it looks like he's jumping on right now.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, if you guys want to look at one more, you still can, but I'm here whenever.
Let's see which one's the biggest.
17,000. Look at that one.
There's one for 74,000.
Oh, it's commercial. Yeah, that's like multi-million dollar property.
Yeah, that is a big property.
Yeah, so $70,000 lien, and you see that property's probably valued at a couple $1 million.
Oh, that's in Kansas City.
It's like a whole
Yeah,
office building.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, it's got a good sized parking lot. What does it say up there? JM Ross, maybe?
yeah. It looks like
Yeah, it's in like a whole, looks like there's other retail around it too.
Yeah, suites available. So, I mean, there's tax liens on all kinds of properties. You could, I mean, if you just wanted to invest into one tax lien, that would be something like that. Here's another one for 39,000.
yeah, lots of commercial opportunities there with some of these bigger tax liens.
Yeah, dispensary.
We see dispensaries get all the time, huh?
Oh, see,
I think in a
definitely.
lot of states they overdid them, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like everyone thought they were going to do one, so they got overdone.
yeah, that makes sense.